First of all, I'd like to apologize because I need to speak in Italian. I know that we have simultaneous interpretation, so I am going to use the service. I think that this is a particularly valuable initiative. It's very stimulating as well. I'll be able to go back to my country, to my parliament, with a number of indications that might be called operative indications, so that the Italian parliament might be able to take on coherent initiatives in fighting against anti-Semitism. I would like to be inspired by a general observation. First of all, by anti-Semitism, I'm talking about a global category, a category that includes all the possible forms of contrast, negation of the reality constituted by the existence of the Jewish people. So I am talking about anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Israelism. So I believe that today this phenomenon does present multiple aspects. They're very preoccupying. I would like to talk to you about what happens within my country, because Italy, in many senses, is a microcosm where we find more generalized phenomena. In particular, recently, first of all, the denial of the Holocaust, not only the denial of its terrifying existence, but the denial of the Holocaust as a single genocide. We all know that history, unfortunately, has produced multiple genocides. The genocide of the Armenian people, the genocide of Stalin in the Ukraine, and recently the genocide that took place in Uganda, or the horror of the concentration camps, the gulags. So history has not only known one single genocide, but the experience of the Shoah is the only genocide because it includes dramatically all the characteristics of genocide. Unfortunately, in Italy, even in universities, we reach this extreme form of denial. There's another very preoccupying aspect that has to do with the conclusions of the recent Catholic Church Synod, where, unfortunately, once again, in spite of what is known by the Second Vatican Council and what John Paul II has established, we have reinstituted the theology of substitution. It is insidious because it negates the continuation of the Jewish history in its biblical stages. There's a third manifestation, which is a political one. In certain environments, we see the boycotting of Israel and its commercial products, which is accompanied by speeches and preaching by university professors that hope that university professors from Israel leave our universities in Italy. And this, in my opinion, is extremely, extremely dangerous and should not be allowed. I think that it is legitimate to criticize the policies of the Israeli government. I belong to a political coalition that has doubts on the choices of Minister Lieberman, but it is not legitimate to deny the legitimacy of the State of Israel and deny that Israel not only has the right to be existent, to have full existence, but it is a democratic state. There is no doubt whatsoever that all the standards that define the quality of democracy are recognizable in the Israeli state. Israel was, this is something that was written by an intellectual. who said, "We are in the middle of the ocean where non-democratic states are present. Therefore, Israel is the rampart of democracy in this area." There's another insidious expression, in particular within the movement of the extreme radical left in our country. That is to say, the assimilation of anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism to anti-Semitism. Recently, there was a translation of a book by an American writer, Markowitz, who says that the United States of America are the most hated nation. This hatred shows how from the end of the 18th century, during the Enlightenment, anti-Semitism is accompanied by anti-Americanism. This is yet one more element that we have to be careful of, because we should never have any complexes in relation to the topic of freedom of expression, freedom of thought. Freedom of thought and expression is not being an anti-Semite, to promote an anti-Semitic stance. This is a denial of the truth, the denial of freedom. In Italy, there are still forms of anti-Semitism that are new. They're extremely insidious. They're extremely dangerous because they go through the behavior and thought of the newer generations. There is an anti-Semitism which is Islamic in nature. I'm not saying that it comes from Islam. It's an Islamic type of thought, which comes from xenophobia, from racism, from exclusion. And I think that this has to be made clear, because from this very clear explanation, we see very clear-cut political choices. In other words, not all racists are anti-Semites, but all anti-Semites are racists. And this has to be said out loud. This teaches us what history tells us in Italian contemporary history. I still have two observations in order to express my thought. We can criticize, we can have doubts on the political choices of the State of Israel, but this cannot be accompanied by generalizations, by stereotypes. I can criticize the government of my country. I can criticize the Berlusconi government. But when I criticize the Berlusconi government, I don't talk about Italians as a nation. I can criticize the Israeli government, but I cannot say the Jewish people. I cannot say that. Therefore, as a parliamentarian, I believe that at the light of what we are able to achieve during this meeting, I have reached a greater degree of consciousness. I understand that in the field of education, in the promotion and production of textbooks, I know that the truth of history cannot be defined by law. It cannot be defined by law. The truth in history tells us that this would mortify the truth of research, but this has to be founded on the acquisition of truth. In fact, I was the mayor of an important Italian city for a long time. This can happen with the promotion of study groups, of trips. We're not talking about school field trips. We're talking about courses of studying critically, and all of this has to be done within our schools, monitoring permanently all of the expressions that regard anti-Semitism. And finally, to end off, this is my last observation. The phenomenon that preoccupies us more than any other one, and this is something that has led us to think within the Committee of Research, which is presided by Honorable Fiamma Nierenstein, who's sitting next to me. The fact that social network mechanisms, in particular internet constitutes a very dangerous vehicle, because in terms of the diffusion and spreading anti-Semitism, racism, hatred in general. Therefore, I would like to ask you all to make sure that there is a legislative initiative in order to make sure that this doesn't happen. There has to be a coordination of parliaments so that the legislative production and the activity of the various authorities are correlated within our parliaments, defining very clearly within international law in order to make sure that each state, each country has adequate instruments to combat the danger that comes from internet by the use of this extraordinary civilization instrument, which can also present two faces. Therefore, I believe that it's mostly on this plane that we should try to produce indications and suggestions in order to make sure that our laws are similar in order to fight the brutality of the presence of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, and anti-Jewish sentiment. Thank you.